So they're saying, look, we got to rebel.
Yeah, that's preposterous.
That we have to pay our tax on these Negroes and on this protection that our mother country gives us with our own army.
Yeah.
So that's a seminal moment. Understanding how Reagan and conservatives utilized the notion of Willie Horton and various Lee Atwater with various racial motifs and visual imagery and coded language, dog whistling.
Right.
It's very, for me to say I identify with the Republican conservatives
because there's a lot of history.
It's a
right. There's a lot of history.
Look. Before I could even say, look, I want to sit down with you guys, you have to apologize. You have to acknowledge what you did.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well, welcome.
Welcome. We're back.
Yes.
Another episode.
Episode 3.
3.
Protest and Peril.
Yes.
So, Professor Anton.
Yes, ma'am.
Lots going on in these last few months, years, and days, hasn't it?
Well, when we look at American civil disobedience, social justice, as you said, it's a lot of citizen recalibrating going on right now.
Right. But there's a historical context, right, in America.
Of course.
So can you tell us a little about that?
So when we look at America as this vast experiment, this project, this whole motivation for, individuals in Europe or England to come here and to create a new culture, but also to exploit the natural resources. One of the things that a lot of people have to keep in mind, when the European came here, he found Native Americans who were already here.
Right.
So it's the notion that when these quote unquote settlers had the opportunity to purchase land, the Native Americans know that they were actually selling land.
Right.
And when I keep in
mind...
The
whole concept of selling Mother Earth was foreign concept.
Totally foreign concept. We're stewards, like in a traditional African culture. We're stewards of this land. But the Europeans said, oh, yeah, we're buying this land and we have these beads. And they're like, oh, okay. But basically the beads and all these other things are gifts that you give to someone when you first meet them.
Right.
So one of the things when we do look at American culture and protest, we have to look at Bacon's Rebellion in 1676, in which Nathaniel Bacon, a colonist in Virginia, who is disgruntled with the way that the elites are having this sort of like passive, a good relationship with the Native Americans.
Okay.
And like many colonists, Bacon, he wants his own land.
Okay.
Because you have the whole idea of the indentured servant. But these individuals, they want their own land. They came with the European mindset that we are the superior people. Okay. This is something that's already in England. The English thought they were superior to the French, to continental Europe. Okay. So here in the United States, in the colonies of Virginia, Bacon, him and some more lower class individuals attempt to overthrow the governor of Virginia.
Okay. Because they wanted land rights.
They wanted their own land.
Okay.
They wanted to go outside of the agreed boundaries that Virginia had set up with the Native Americans to take their land. So it's this constant encroaching upon Native American disputed and undisputed treaty lines that erupted in this rebellion. Okay. So the rebellion was squashed. Bacon, him and his rebels, destroyed. But within the mind of, that would go to our classist interpretation of American society, this notion of keeping people divided, keeping the slaves from joining forces with the poor whites. These things evolve out of Bacon's rebellion that the upper classes will manipulate those on the bottom.
Okay. So that would be like the first sort of
experiment in the manipulation of individuals by using race to keep them from unifying to overthrow the upper classes.
Okay.
Right?
Well, that's a lot.
Yeah. So basically you seeing this idea at the root or at the foundation of what this country will become. Yeah.
Right. So it didn't just start with like the LA riots.
No, it didn't start with the LA riots.
Obviously. Before we get to that though.
It's in the DNA of the country.
True. So I know we could probably go through all the different centuries, but after Bacon's Rebellion, there's seminal riots or protests that we know in history. What are those?
Yeah, the two most important are the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act.
Right.
And these are very important because now America, the colony, is starting to develop this wealth
Right.
From the exploitation of the Africans.
Yeah.
And since we live at the time, it was a mercantile economy.
Right.
So basically, everything that's made by those who were English subjects all flowed to the mother country.
Okay.
So as America is developing its own identity and becoming wealthy, England passed these laws in order to get some more of that wealth.
Right.
Right. So
Through taxes,
through taxes.
taxing the colonies.
Yes. So the Sugar Act is very important because basically they're telling Americans, you have to buy sugar from us. And the people who are producing sugar for the English are, the people who are producing sugar for England is Jamaica.
Okay, right.
So Americans have to buy
The
from
good
Jamaica.
sugar cane.
Yeah, you have to buy from Jamaica.
Yeah.
But we have New Orleans, right? And also we have Quebec. So you have the French who have access to the sugar in Haiti.
Okay, yeah.
So
we
Americans
had options, but they forced us to choose their one.
exactly
Okay.
because of mercantilism. We have
Okay.
to stay beholden to our mother country.
Right.
And the second one was the Stamp Act.
Okay.
And the Stamp Act is basically saying if you make any files, if you create any documents, a will,
Right.
or if you're a lawyer, you have to buy a stamp.
Okay.
Who does the Stamp Act hurt? The elites.
Oh, okay.
The Stamp Act hurt the elites because
I didn't know
the
anything
slaves,
helped
the
it.
slaves, they're not reading.
Okay, right. Oh, so
The
who
indentured
affected-
servants,
Yeah.
they're not reading.
So all of a sudden now it's the elites that are feeling the stranglehold of the mother country.
Of the mother country.
Okay.
So they're saying, look, we got to rebel.
Yeah, that's
know,
that's preposterous.
That we have to pay our tax on these Negroes and on this protection that our mother country gives us with our own army.
Yeah.
So that's a seminal moment.
Okay.
But also the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah, of course.
The
of
Boston
course.
Tea
Yeah,
Party
yeah,
is
yeah.
a seminal moment of protest in which you have these English colonists dress up as Native Americans,
Right.
destroy tea, throw it in the Boston Harbor. You know, so basically they wanted to hide their hand, and if anyone was going to get killed, it's going to be the Native Americans. Boom. But you also have African Americans who are
Right.
protesting. You know, those who are enslaved, they are burning plantations. They're killing slave owners. You have the New York riots.
Right.
You have the Stonewall riots.
Yeah.
And you have our ancestor Nat Turner.
Right.
You have Gabrielle Presser.
Right.
So you have all these things that's going on within the narrative of America
Right.
in which protests, either civil disobedience or violence, is a part of the tradition of America.
In order to affect change,
Affect change, policy, and also to obtain freedom.
freedom. Okay, so at the end of the day, it was, people living together, coming all different walks of life, trying to make it happen. And then all of a sudden here in this country, we talk about, equal liberty and rights and freedoms. But when you acknowledge the fact that there is inequality or there is a struggle, an American citizen has the right to, bring up their grievances. They also have utilized protests / riots / civil disobedience and unfortunately sometimes violence to ensure that they have the freedoms that are supposed to be instilled from the Constitution.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that when we look at African Americans within the culture of the United States, that black people identify with the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
If we look at these two documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, the Declaration is the spirit and the Constitution is the body.
Right.
And what we want to be is like the Declaration.
Well, that's the huge
but
aspirational goal.
It's the huge aspirational goal.
Right.
But who we actually are is
How we get there is through the Constitution.
But I don't think that we will ever get to the Declaration of
Well,
Independence
Wait,
because
don't say never.
well, it's not actually never.
Always have to aspire and look.
Look, it's not actually never.
Yeah.
It's if white America is ready to relinquish their pseudo racial ethno-history of supremacy.
Okay.
And I don't think that they can do that because they've been invested in it for so long that for them to tear the mask off, they're going to lose part of their face.
Well, ouch. Well, I
Think
I would,
about it.
well, I
Think
would
about
argue
it.
too that there's a certain type or a certain sort of, I hate to say this, but there's certain types of white folk. First of all, white folk aren't all the same. I had an elder who passed away already who said, not everybody that looks like you is your friend, and not everybody who doesn't look like you is your enemy. And what we're seeing now, especially in this time where more and more people have found that we have a common sort of economic insecurity,
Yeah.
and that at the end of the day, it's not necessarily the skin tone or sort of like where you're born. There is this supra level of control from the power elites that kind of, again, they distract us from unifying, like you had mentioned earlier, in order for us to not realize the power that we have once we do unify, in order to, again, create more of our power and, affect more change for the betterment of everyone else.
Well, one of the things that I acknowledge and that I know that all white people aren't racist, right?
I'm glad you know that.
Right?
Okay.
But it was something that Jane Elliott did. Jane Elliott from, you saw the documentary, The Bluest Eyes?
I need to see
The
it.
Blue Eye. It's called Blue Eye.
Okay.
Check that out.
I
Basically,
will.
she takes two groups. If you have blue eyes, you go over here. If you have brown eyes, you go over there. And throughout the whole documentary, she made white people feel uncomfortable about their privilege and their physical features.
Okay.
So she walked into a classroom and said, if you are willing to exchange places with black people, stand up. If you're willing to exchange how you're treated in America like black people, stand up. So no white people stood up.
Okay.
And she said, wow, this lets me know that you know that there
There's
are
an
negative,
advantage and there's a disadvantage.
and there are things happening to black people and you don't want to do anything about it. So my whole thing is, I don't believe that even though some white people may disagree with what goes on, they're not willing to say, no, I'll put myself in that position. A few will, but I don't believe the society as a whole will say, I'm willing to be treated like an African American, or I want an African American
Well,
to be
yours-
treated
but,
like
I
me,
mean-
because there's a preferential treatment that comes with it.
well,
There's an assumption that, I'm not doing something when I'm actually doing it.
what?
Basically, when
Sorry, I didn't miss
no,
that.
no,
Sorry, I didn't miss that one.
no. When a white person drives down the street,
Okay.
there's not an assumption that they're doing anything illegal,
Okay.
because the color of crime in America has always been black. Even when black people were enslaved, to try to escape the freedom, you found yourself being a fugitive, which could be seen as a felonious act.
Okay.
So it's a crime for me to want to be free, and if I run, I've broken the law. So the assumption of guilt has always been slated
right, I
towards black
understand,
people.
I understand.
But there's an assumption of not guilty or non-criminal activities going on when there's a group of white people together.
Okay.
So I don't believe that white Americans as a whole would say, I'm willing to change the way that the society treats a demographic, because we're African Americans is the most incarcerated ethnic group in history.
Right.
And this is not by happenstance. Right. There's a lot of people. There are a lot of silent, contributors. There's a lot of people through various genders and ethnic groups who have made
Right.
their peace with black males being mass incarcerated, with black males dying, with black males being undereducated, with black males not being employed. These are things that society has basically made a peace with and accept.
Well, okay. I hear what you're saying, but
And
If
it's not that we want as a black. It's not that we want people to feel sorry for us. We're not looking for no one to save us, because the only people that can save us is us.
Right.
But these are some of the things that I see.
Right.
And for me to be a black man and to say, oh, woe is me, you'll never get that out of me. I'm not
Yeah.
one of those black males that's going to be on there and say, oh, well, this person's having it like that. No. I'm just working harder and I'm moving smarter.
Right, I get it. But what I'm saying, I guess, in that respect is like on the conservative side, and again, like this is my new world. I've only been in it in the last, 2.5 years or so.
Okay.
For me, it's the first time where I've been treated and or thought of and felt like an equal American. Before I became a conservative, even when I was an independent and definitely when I was a Democrat, the conversation was always in a racial context, definitely in a gender context, and as if my talking about liberties is an asterisk versus we are equals in this in the struggle, in the journey, in the majesty that is America. That is how we as conservatives approach the matter. And that's why I think you talk about, there are people in America that are totally like sort of acquiesce to this concept of locking up black folks. Then you see a lot more conservatives now that are like, knowing that, crime and punishment doesn't help anyone. That, one strike and you're out, that sort of, that very draconian use of law and justice. There are some conservatives, more like in Texas and in even the Koch brothers, are investing more in the citizen and making sure that if and when people are, getting into the system, they're eventually going to be let out somehow. Make sure that returning citizens have the coping mechanisms, skills, tools, education to enter back into the workforce. And so that is something that I believe is an opportunity for. I know this has kind of gone off.
No.
Our tangent, but that's how I see it.
I understand, sister, but me understanding how Reagan and conservatives utilized the notion of Willie Horton
Right.
and various Lee Atwater with
Right.
various racial motifs and visual imagery and coded language, dog whistling.
Right.
It's very, for me to say I identify with the Republican conservatives.
Because there's a
that
lot
they
of
wanna-
history.
that- yeah, it's a
Right, there's a lot of
give
history.
me look. Before I could even say, look, I want to sit down with you
Yeah,
guys,
you
you have
gotta
to
acknowledge
apologize.
it.
You have to
Yeah.
acknowledge what
Yeah.
you did.
Yeah, I got you.
And these individuals utilize dangerous and damaging imagery.
They're no better than the
10 to
liberal
15
whites.
years
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
civil rights legislation, and we were starting to see some of the full fruit of
Right.
black people moving
Yeah,
from
we had
one-
progress, and
ex-
then everything, stopped.
and then they became the individuals who were attacking and utilizing this dog whistling and
Yeah.
this. So it's like when I hear conservatives and I hear Republican,
Right.
it's like
I know it leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
a very
But
bad taste in my
But
mouth.
what I would argue is that, in my experience, again, this is just my new bright open eyes. I admit there's very little that I trust in the Democrat Party. You know how I feel about it. But when it comes to Republicanism, what I've noticed is that it's a party of individuals, in that we all have fundamental principles, and we all sort of we focus on family, freedoms, free enterprise, faith, limited government. But all those different things mean different to each one citizen
Right.
because we are individuals. And if there are people who have manipulated, utilized, or discriminated against this person in the name of the party, it's not the entire party doing it. Do you understand what I'm saying? I see the diversity in my new party, unlike what I witnessed and experienced in the Democrat Party. So I would just encourage you and other African Americans to acknowledge the fact that that is the fundamental difference between the two parties. The Democrat Party is follow the leader, do not differentiate. This is what we're stand for, regardless of how backwards this policy, this narrative, this paradigm is, versus Republicans having a different approach to how you conserve the republic. Some people focus on, free market. They're all about the money. They're all about, making sure that capitalism just reigns, et cetera. And they kind of I don't want to say ignore, but they don't prioritize the liberty piece. They don't prioritize equality piece. So it's always this sort of dance amongst the members of the party to figure out what best serves the community. Because don't forget, they're not expecting the government to fix anything. At the end of the day, it's the individual citizen, what you can do with your family, what you can do with your community. Focus on that. And that's where we go back to our history as African Americans. And when we were...
But we got to understand that in order for us to do things as individuals,
Yes.
you have to maintain and tend to the social fabric.
True.
You have to make sure that individuals are provided with the same opportunities.
I know, but what I'm saying is make sure that every individual knows that they have everyone has his portion. You know, you learn about it in church. Each one has their God-given potential. And if you start there, that is what I never saw from the other side, that you as an individual, you as Anton, you as Josie, you as Bumquisha, whatever, every single person who is an American citizen specifically is equal in their ability to take what their talents are. Should we have opportunities for people to learn more and to find and make sure that they have, you know, more what am I trying to say? Are there deficiencies in the system and or how people are born and or raised? Yes. That is the fundamental difference. Some people view us as deficient and different and therefore can't help ourselves and have to be sort of patronized and sort of victimized. Or
pathology.
Right.
So basically, the introducing that we are genetically deficient,
Right.
because we're black,
Right.
But also
that is the part. That's the part that I really get.
Yeah.
That gets my, you know, blood boiling.
Yeah,
You know?
that's one of the things that when people start talking about post-traumatic slave disorder and things that happen in slavery having an effect on individuals today.
Right.
I don't agree with that, you know, because as an individual who researched the late 19th century, I saw and actually read what the slaves did with their freedom.
Right.
But when I look what has happened today
Right.
in the wake of deindustrialization, mass incarceration, unemployment,
The growth of the nanny state.
the carceral state,
The what?
the carceral state, the carceral state. That's what my friend
I never
called it.
heard that. I mean, one could argue, I mean, throughout our history that, you know, our population started off being large, right? Once we were freed, I don't know, we outnumbered white Americans, what, like 10-1 or something, just based on the sheer population, right?
There were never more blacks in the United States than whites.
Okay.
In certain states,
areas, yeah,
there were
okay.
more blacks than
Right.
whites based upon, especially in the South.
That's what I'm saying.
One
yeah.
of the things that always fascinates me is how many Africans were actually in Mississippi.
Right.
Because when we look at the Great Migration, you can go to various spaces and find large communities of people from Mississippi.
Right. Because that's where my family's from, actually.
Mississippi,
We came from
then St. Louis.
East St. Louis.
Yeah,
East St. Louis. East St.
Excuse-
Louis. That's all
excuse
right.
me, East St. Louis. Yeah.
The poorer side of town.
Yeah, yeah.
man. So let's try to get back to some of our protest stuff.